It's often said that whatever you put your mind to, you can accomplish. Whatever you can conceive mentally, you can achieve worldly. And sometimes I think to myself the validity of that and about the validity of that and sometimes I get the impression that there's more to it than just that. And the reason why I say it is because you often hear people who've accomplished what we consider great things in a worldly way, and they'll say things like, you gotta put your mind to it. Like you can use your mind power to mentally manifest whatever it is you want. But then they'll turn around and say, man, you gotta work hard. You gotta strive. You gotta struggle. You gotta put in a lot of hard work. And that entails physicality. And that entails stress and being beat and worn out. And when you think about it, and I'm not trying to discourage anybody from working hard, but when you think about it, it's like it's kind of contradictory somewhat. Like if you really, really put your mind to it, and if the mind has the power to manifest in the real world, then the whole thing about wearing yourself out shouldn't really be valid. And the reason why I say that is because, I had a thought, and it has to do with the story of Adam and Eve in the book of Genesis. And here's a side thought. I can recall talking to a friend of mine who's of the Islamic faith, and he was telling me about their version of heaven when you go to heaven. And he said something to the effect of, in heaven, you can, if you want a peach, you can just think about a peach, and a peach will appear like right in front of you, just manifest, materialize, and you can just grab it and you can enjoy it. And he said that's how it works. Heaven works in their version of the afterlife. And I'm thinking, wow, that's pretty cool. But it gave me a notion. Like I don't really think like most Christians. My interpretation of the Bible is kind of altered from what I was actually taught by my elders and other people who call themselves Christians. And my understanding of the Bible was altered because I actually read the Bible. And when I heard that statement, that story from my Islamic friend, it got me to thinking. And I was thinking, what if we are subconscious creatures from the greater perspective of God? Like, I know there's the big buzz nowadays about, people needing to wake up to become conscious and that kind of thing. And, the whole thing behind that is that if people have negative mentalities, they're unconscious souls. So I get that, but what I'm trying to say is, what if we are subconscious creatures in the mind of God? Like, And what makes the world so hard, destructive, and volatile lies in the fact that we're subconscious creatures from the perspective of God. Suppressed subconscious creatures. Like, if something bad happens to you and it traumatizes you, and your mind has a way of suppressing the trauma so it won't affect you in your waking reality as you go about your day-to-day business. And I was thinking, like, when Adam and Eve were in the garden and they did what they weren't supposed to do, they ate of the wrong fruit, they got cast out of the garden. As a matter of fact, it says in the Bible, the book of Genesis, that God drove the man out of the garden. What if that means, and I'm kind of leaning toward the idea that it does, but what if that means God suppressed Adam? Adam was once a conscious man. And because he disobeyed, he became subconscious, kind of like a memory, so to speak. Not having direct access to God. And what I mean by that, for instance, like if you're in the presence of somebody, like a friend or a loved one, you are conscious of them. And they're there, right there with you. You don't have to think about them. You're aware of them. You can deal with them and, enjoy their company. But like when they leave and go home, they're not there anymore. They're no longer in your presence. So if you want to be aware of them, you got to try to call them up in your memory. I mean, I know you can get on the phone and do that kind of thing, but you know what I'm trying to say. You got to conjure them up in your memory and try to think about them. And oftentimes it's a little bit fuzzy. And say, for instance, if your friend was in your presence at that moment and you're aware of them and they need help, like let's say if they were sitting in this chair behind me, needed help getting up, you could just help them up. But if they're out of your presence, they need help lifting up, you really can't do anything because you're no longer in their presence. Kind of like that. And when Adam and Eve disobeyed, that was just the cake, so to speak. The icing on the cake was when Cain killed his brother Abel. Now that was over the top disobedient. I mean, it was even said that his blood cried out from the earth, from the ground of the earth, Abel's blood. So Cain got suppressed deep in the mind of God to such a degree that he was forgotten about. Not even a memory to call up, to think about, but just forgotten about. It says in the book that Cain went to live in the land of Nod. And when you think about the meaning of the word Nod, it basically means falling asleep or sleep, the land of sleep. So the Bible calls death, a form of spiritual sleep. And so Cain was basically a dead man walking. God had no regard for him. It even says that in the Bible with regard to his initial offering. God had no respect, no regard for Cain's offering. But, I mean, what if that's the way it is? And what if that's why we got to struggle so hard on earth? I mean, we tend to talk about how God is here or paying attention to us and doing all this stuff, but so many people continue to beg and ask other people to pray for. I mean, I'm not trying to down that, but it's just the spirit life is a struggle as well as the physical, worldly life. The physical life is a struggle, and the spirit life is a struggle too. And it's strange because the reason I feel that the spirit life is such a struggle is because our minds disconnects us. Our minds are like wedges that kind of separates us from God, and it also separates us from that level of power that we can truly mentally manifest in this real world. I mean, if you think about it, when Adam was driven out of the garden, he was actually told, in sweat, tears, you will till the ground until the day you die. You will till the ground in sorrow until the day you die. And I think that because of that situation, I think we are dwelling in the subconscious mind of God. I mean, it's not really so easy to explain. I am using symbology, but nevertheless, if you really think about it, life shouldn't be such a struggle. Technically speaking, people shouldn't hate each other. I mean, technically speaking, nobody should be hating anybody. I mean, we were given intellects that should propel us above and beyond the average earth creature to levels of spirituality to where we should already be dwelling in the kingdom of God. I'm thinking about in the book of Genesis how it says Enoch walked with God, and Enoch was not, because God took him. Apparently, Enoch figured out a way how to get himself unsuppressed, which is walking with God means. He was somehow able to become a conscious man to where he eventually entered into the presence of God, such as angels are in the presence of God. And then finally, when God took him, I think that means he entered back into the garden. He found his way back in. So, translation, he disappeared. And from that point on, it's only natural to think that he ascended to a greater level of existence. Now, if you think about the New Testament, the Messiah came to this earth to take sin upon himself. Basically, he became one of those spiritually suppressed souls, spiritually suppressed within the mind of God. But if you notice what he did, the first thing he did after he got baptized by John the Baptist, the first thing he did was go into the wilderness. And what he did in the wilderness, the Bible says to be tempted of Satan. The Spirit drew him into the wilderness. The Spirit lured him into the wilderness. The Spirit, not the devil. The devil didn't. The devil was in the wilderness waiting on him. But he went there, and And I believe he was showing us how to unsuppress ourselves. How? By consistently denying of the devil. I mean, he even said after he came out of the wilderness, he was talking to his followers, and he said something to the effect of, the son can only do what he sees the father does, or go or whatever. In other words, the son, the spiritual, individualized spirit, should be connected to, and therefore will be guided by, the greater level of spirit that we call the Most High God. But at first, he was suppressed. Put it like that. When he was born into the world, he became suppressed, just like the rest of us. And one of the reasons why I also think that's true is not only because of the crucifixion, but because as he was being crucified, he yelled out, it was like, well, why have you forsaken me? That proved that he was kind of in the same boat that we were, but unlike what a lot of us are doing, he was consistently like Enoch, walking with God, because he was listening to that higher voice. And that higher voice is in us all. It's in every last one of us. We just have to stop being hard-headed and start listening to it. For instance, I can recall it was a few years ago, I was at a bus stop, and I was waiting on a bus. I was going to go pick up my car from a mechanic, and there was a guy getting on a bus, and he dropped, if I recall correctly, it was a $10 bill. He didn't even know he dropped it. And, I picked it up and I gave it to him because a voice told me that was the right thing to do. And, but don't get me wrong, there was another voice that came and warred with that voice that told me to give the man his money. That voice said, hey man, that's, finders keepers, losers weepers. That's lunch, man. That's a half a tank of gas when you go get your car. I mean, it was telling me all this stuff. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't want anybody to do me like that. So I believe I listened to the right voice, which is the voice that the Messiah consistently listened to and obeyed. And as he was able to do that, he gradually rose in consciousness, and to the point to where he was crucified, because he grew and expanded spiritually and mentally to such a degree that that particular body couldn't handle the power and the authority that his spirit had. So he had to be crucified to get a new body to accommodate his spiritual essence that outgrew that earthly body. I'm going to make another video about that soon enough. But, again, it shouldn't be that hard to live life. It shouldn't be that hard to get along with other people. It just shouldn't be that hard. We shouldn't have to struggle to communicate. We shouldn't. I mean, we shouldn't be contrary. But that's the way the world is. And I believe this is the way the world is because the world is not only suppressed away from the consciousness of God, suppressed within a lower level of God's subconsciousness. It's not only suppressed, but it's gradually being forgotten about. But again, it does teach us in the Bible a way that you, as an individual, can begin to rise back up to your original glory, if you will. and go back to your father's house. Because remember, like the man said, it is the Father's good pleasure to give the kingdom to those who ask. Anyway, thank you for listening. Hope you are well. Subscribe to the channel. Share the link. And God bless.